All right. Again, real quick, there's going to be a little bit of overlap between what Robin and I have. Who am I? This truly is me and my dad. You can tell I was really interested in gardening at a young age. My background and my career, I'm retired now, but my career was 37 years in telecom and information technology. So I knew very little about gardening other than I love gardening. Became a master gardener a little over 10 years ago when Gina Myers, our extension agent, talked to me at a community gardening conference. And, she said, well, have you thought about becoming a master gardener? I said, well, kind of had thought about it. And I've been working with community gardens for a number of years already. And she said, well, you'd be great for this master gardener. And it's been so much fun. And thank you all for wanting to be master gardeners. We're looking forward to having you as master gardeners. It's great to see younger people too, also in the group. But I do a lot with community gardens. So, yeah, and I say younger, I mean a little less gray than I have. So I know. And older people are good too. There's maturity in that. But my philosophy is if I get a master gardener when they're in their 20s or 30 somethings versus their 50s and 60 somethings, that's a lot more years as a master gardener than you can be there. So I'm in favor. And young people have newer ideas. Younger people have newer ideas.
You went when you're ahead.
I'm going down to it. I'm digging. I've been here in North Carolina for over 30 years, and I've been gardening here and doing community gardens pretty much since then. Besides helping run a number of community gardens and providing consulting as a master gardener, I have my own about 1/4 acre of garden, and we were talking about deer because the deers are so prevalent. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But really, I'm here about organic gardening, and I'll use a little caveat with an asterisk. I'm an organic gardener mostly. There are times and places where organic gardening just is more challenging. And as a master gardener, you have to accept that. There are some people that are pure purists, right? And the purist is, do I have organic seeds? Do I have organic growing media? Do I have organic soil? Do I only put organic chemicals on there? And realize organic doesn't mean chemical free. It means organic chemicals. You're still putting chemicals on. And so the same policies that you have about following the manufacturer's directions, being careful about what you use, you can still get hurt using organic chemicals. You can still hurt people on your plants. So, but we're going to talk about organic principles and gardening, define a little bit about what organic is and a systematic approach. We are not going to talk a lot about IPM, which Robin indicated that we were, but I don't have actually a lot of
IPM.
Huh?
I did IPM.
Yeah, so you already know a little about integrated pest management. We'll refer to a lot of these things and apply them to organic practices. And then we'll talk about organic strategies. So really beginning, and we've talked about soils, and you all know a lot about soils. The number one thing is, do you have healthy soils? Do you have a place where your plants can grow and mature without having to add a lot of things? And you start with that healthy soil. Very, very critical. Do you have nutrients? And do you have a nutrient reservoir inside of that soil? Do you follow integrated pest management philosophy and policies? And it goes through those multiple steps of, physical or mechanical, biological, and only getting down into a chemical when you really have no choice after you've gone through the IPM process. Do you focus on using natural and organic fertilizers and pest products when you need to? So when we focus on it, again, we're really looking at, do you have healthy plants? So just like us, when we're healthy, I say that as I've been sick for the past 3 weeks. When we're healthy, we are much better. Plants are the same way, right? When they have a healthy soil, a healthy environment, good growing scenarios, they are much better. And that includes our soils. Do we have good sanitation? Do we follow good cleanup practices? After we have plants that might be diseased, what do we do with them? Do we let them sit and the leaves sit on the ground and spread more diseases, or do we take and destroy those plants? Do we pick our plants from the get-go to be the right types of plants? Really important. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Do we provide an environment that has low stress for our plants? Because just like us, when we get stressed, we tend to get sick or not do as well. Plants are the same way. If it's really hot, if it's really dry, your plants start to wilt. guess what? They're gonna have a lot more problems than a plant that is in a better environment or healthier and less stressful. We try to encourage beneficial insects, beneficial plants, beneficial ways of growing. And then when we have to do some treatment, do we deal with natural products, organic products? It's a systematic approach. We build biologically diverse environments, right? We are very much into don't grow the same homogeneous plant in the same thing. If you're planting tomatoes, if you're planting beefsteak tomato and you do that every single year, and you only plant beefsteak tomato, if there is a problem with the beefsteak tomato, guess what? All your plants are going to have that problem. The same thing with your landscape, same thing with other things. If you provide some diversity in that, you will get a better, stronger environment. Do you pick plants that have disease resistance, that are better and maybe not as flavorful to that deer as you might have seen in other plants? Do you follow those good practices, and are you sustainable? Is what you do repeatable and sustainable over time? We talked about building healthy soils. Robin's already talked about microbes. Soil tests, very, very critical. My philosophy is you can go to the pharmacy and get all the medicines you want, but if you haven't gone to the doctor to find out what's wrong, you're just buying medicines. And we see this all the time with homeowners. Oh, I'm going to go put fertilizer on my lawn. Have you done a soil test yet? Well, no. Why? Because what fertilizer are you going to put on your lawn? Do you need nitrogen? Do you need phosphorus? Do you need potassium? Do you need all of them or none of them? Is your pH right? Those are the critical things. And we get so many people that, oh yeah, what kind of organic fertilizer are you going to use? Well, have you done a soil test? Well, no. Why? Because again, can't tell you what kind of fertilizer you want to use. Do you manage your pH? As Robin said, for vegetables, it's very critical that we have that pH. And contrary to most of the soils around here, I have very, very alkaline. My soil, when I do a soil test in my vegetable garden, is usually 7 to 8, which is absurdly alkaline. And that's for two reasons. One, I use a lot of compost, which tends to be alkali. And I'm on a well. And so I have a lot of lime in my water. I've already got a lot of alkalinity that's in there. So I use acidic things. I use leaf mulch. I'm sorry, I'm losing my hearing. I use organic matter. I use leaf mulch. I use ammonium sulfite to try to lower that pH. It does take a long time, and I'm still struggling trying to get that pH into that 6.2 to 6.7 range. I do use raised beds, and I recommend raised beds. Lots of ways of doing it. Great school garden, Willow Springs School Garden. They use cinder blocks. Kids took them home and painted them with their parents and brought them back. So they combined art and science and math all in this community school garden that they're doing, but they use cinder blocks to do that. Some of the other gardens I know even grow little herbs and other things in the little cells in the cinder block. It's really kind of cool. So lots and lots of ways that you can do that to make raised beds. Right plant, right place. Fruit and vegetables. Again, we talked already about sun. We talked about well-drained soil. We talked about things like pH. They do have salt spray here more on the ocean side if you have things like other conditions. Recently, we've got some pretty bad weather. We've had flooding. So how do you deal with that? And if you do run into situations, you may in your master gardener work as you talk to the community about people that have had flooding. We have some specific master gardener publications or extension publications about what to do when you get flooded gardens. A lot of contaminants come in flooding. So be very careful when you're dealing with folks that might have that. Disease-resistant cultivars. And I want to talk a little bit about that up front. As you said, I saw on the common crop chart, a lot of varieties that are in there. We are in the process of trying to revise the common crop chart with maybe some newer varieties that have a little more disease resistance. And so, for example, you'll see tomato varieties that have resistance to nematodes or Fusarium. Speaking about flooding, we have a little bit of flooding problem right here. So you want to look at some of those varieties. We talked about, Robin talked a little bit about, some of the blights as well as, some of the mildews. Look at curtibits that are more resistant to downy and powdery mildew. There are a lot of varieties that are out there. Now, again, for those that are organic, there's a big discussion about GMO or non-GMO. And GMO is a relative term, right? So when you cross plants, you're genetically modifying it. That's the way we get different varieties today, right? You take a little pollen from here, you take a little pollen from here, you mix them together, you get a new plant. You get a witch's broom or another type of plant on a tree that causes a natural genetic permutation that maybe gives you now a dwarf pine tree that you didn't have before. Are those natural modifications genetically modified? Yes. Is it a man-made genetic modification where somebody went in and actually tweaked with the genes? That's a different thing. So it's also an area that's kind of open, right? You're going to get people that said, well, I don't want GMO modified seed. Okay, but then nature genetically modifies seeds all the time, right? Every time you get a crossbreed, I separate my hot and cold peppers on different sides of my gardens because those plants can crossbreed. I can get hot cold peppers and cold hot peppers. So nature is genetically modifying stuff all the time. Unless you actually, if you do open pollination, which all of my gardens are open pollinated gardens, they're all going to be genetically modified. So it's a let me say religious question. It's a question that some people are on one side versus the other of things that you can do. The jury is really still out on genetic modification. And there's a person over there who argued a long time that GMO is not a bad thing. And it is, because in order for us to feed the world, frankly, we have to modify certain things. We have to be able to grow things better with better varieties. And there's a ton of new varieties that are modified, either man-made genetically or not man-made modified, that are really better than our tried and true. An heirloom, don't get me wrong, I'm way in favor of heirloom seeds, but new varieties have a lot of things in disease resistance. And if I'm a farmer or if I'm someone that has to grow for a living, I want the easiest and best way with the least amount of chemicals. And one way is using GMO plants. Stress, we talked about stress, keeping plants under stress. Stress reduces photosynthesis. When you see these plants wilt, they are shut down. They are no longer doing the photosynthesis process. So they are going to have worse problems, more problems. They're going to attract more pests. If it's too hot, if it's too dry, if your pH is wrong, if your nutrients aren't there, if your soil is compacted, these are all things that cause stress on our plants and things that we don't want to do. And part of our organic process is to minimize these type of environmental issues that cause us then to have to do something with those plants and cause us to use more chemicals and more non-organic processes. We also use a good offense. How do we avoid, diseases and pests? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Crop rotation, really, really critical. A part of what Robin talked about, why we rotate crops, different family, different pests, different diseases, giving that soil a chance to rest and not have that same host plant that's there, giving that soil a chance to rebuild the nutrients that the tomato or that pepper plant pulled out of it. By planting a legume or some type of pea in that location, I'm going to add more nitrogen into that soil because the tomato and peppers are pulling nitrogen out of it. Crop rotation is a very, very critical thing for organic processes. Understanding your planting dates. Know when pests and diseases are there. So when you talk about squash vine borer, when does a squash vine borer come out? Well, typically they planted their eggs in the soil maybe the previous year. They're going to come out as soon as it gets warm. Unfortunately, we're warm a large portion of our growing season, so they can have multiple opportunities. It's not like in the north where squash vine borer, if you can break that early springtime cycle, you can keep that plant from getting infected with the squash vine borer. Here we have too warm of a season for too often that we can have multiple cycles for that insect. Know your pests, know the problems, and it's going to take you some time. It's taken me 30 plus years to and with help of some great entomologists to learn about my insects and to learn as much as I can about what those pests are and diseases, when they occur, how can I avoid them. One thing for the squash vine borer is to plant early. You can keep them under a row cover until they start flowering. That is a physical barrier, part of our IPM methodology, right? It's a physical connection or mechanical barrier that keeps the moth from planting its eggs in the soil until you remove that barrier, and then it can. But those are ways to kind of help break that process. And these are things that we're doing as part of that IPM and organic process. Interplanting. So Robin talked a little bit about mixing different types of plants in there. Flowers, definitely. Again, I'm a fan of planting flowers, not only because they attract beneficial insects, even if they're not native flowers. And I will encourage you, native plants are great, but insects really are not, and bees and flies and other pollinators are not really flying around going, oh, there's a native plant, I'm gonna go to that one. Oh, there's not a native plant, I'm not gonna go to that. That's a Japanese plant, I don't wanna go there. They're all about the flower shape, color, scent. That it doesn't matter as much for those native plants versus non-native plants. There is a reference here to companion plants, and I have a little problem with this slide. You will run into people who will ask about companion planting because, oh, it's great, it's the greatest thing. Plants are sitting there, they're talking to each other, they're all, about, no, not really. Plants don't do that. Companion planting is correct in terms of if there's physical and chemical things, they are really not talking to each other. Not as far as we have been able to tell in terms of research. So companion planting is not a scientific thing. It's more of an internet hearsay. Is there three sisters, the corn, the squash, and the beans? Do they physically work together? Absolutely. Corn is a stalk. The beans can climb up the stalk and it gets more sunlight. It protects the squash from a sun perspective. So yes, there's physical things that companion planting does. But recognize that companion planting is not a lot what the internet says it is. And you're going to get a lot of those questions about, companion planting. Let's see. Strong scents. So someone was asking about deer. Things like rosemary, strong scented plants will also tend to turn off deer. But if deer are hungry, if rabbits are hungry, they're going to eat everything. And the fact that you got rosemary growing there, or you put Irish Spring soap around to have the cleanest and freshest deer in the neighborhood, it's not going to help for very long if they're hungry. Spacing. Can we talk a little about your spacing? We did some of your exercise, a little bit about that. Airflow definitely helps prevent disease. It helps promote growth in terms of not having to compete for those same nutrients. If you plant those tomato plants instead of 2 feet apart each way, if you plant them 1 foot apart, they're going to compete with each other for those same nutrients in the soil. Its roots are going to get down there. They're going to be competing. So keep that spacing in mind. Again, these are representative spacings. You can plant things closer. You can plant things further apart. This is what we use and try to tell the community. Make sure that you have adequate water and that you don't create a habitat for pests and diseases. So that means cleaning up leaves that are diseased or problem plants at the base of your plants. Watering, really critical. Typically like to water in the morning. Got a lot of questions. It's better to water in the morning or afternoon. Morning is better. You don't want to water at night. Disease, particularly waterborne diseases and funguses, have a tendency, if you water in the morning, the plant has a chance to dry out during the daytime, assuming that it's sunny, versus at night, there's a longer period of time without the plant drying out, gives a more chance and opportunity for those diseases to grow. So I highly recommend watering in the morning. Now, I oftentimes will sometimes water in the afternoon, particularly during our heat, during July and August. My plants start wilting because of lack of water. And so I will do some potentially early afternoon watering to give them a little boost to keep them from going into stress. Drip systems are better, but if you don't do water and teach other gardeners to water at the base, a tendency for people to water the leaves because for some reason they think the leaves are absorbing all the water. No, it's all in the roots. The leaves and the plant itself absorbs very little water. Nutrients, really important. And over here, I've got a bunch of things we're going to go through in our practicum. A little bit about fertilization. Mulching is really critical. A good cheap way of keeping leaves down. Definitely mulching options. I get the newspaper. I'm one of the few people in the world still that get a written newspaper. My wife likes to read it. I use newspaper mulch. The inks on the newspaper are no longer bad. They're all soy-based, so they will all break down. But you can use wood chips. Again, wood chips, you have to be careful a little bit. Some of the fresher wood chips that aren't matured will have pulls some of the nitrogen out of it, but I'm not sure it's pulls as much as people say it does. I've never personally done a study of that, but and I haven't seen anything that says, but you need to look at using some type of mulch mechanism. It helps keep things cooler, helps keep moisture in there. And for me, it's a weed problem. Weeding is the bane of my gardening existence. The main thing on like tomato plants is I want to keep that rain and from hitting the soil and splashing up onto the leaves, because many tomato plants, a lot of the problems are soil-borne diseases. And by creating that barrier, keeping that soil that may be contaminated, because I crop rotate, but not as much as I can. Typical commercial crop rotation for tomatoes now is 7 years. So you don't plant tomatoes in that same bed every 7 years. That's not sustainable for me as a homeowner and as a community garden leader. We just don't have that many beds. I can't, and I grow too many nightshade varieties of peppers and tomatoes and eggplants and other things. I can't do that. Stay away from the volcano unless you're in Hawaii or Iceland or something. You know, we just don't need this, and people have this tendency, and it causes all sorts of problems with these trees and shrubs. This is a picture. I think these actually are master gardeners. They're doing a vegetable or a lasagna composting and making a lasagna bed, which is a layer of newspaper, mulch, hay or straw, cardboard, a lot of different things that are in this kind of this layer. Has a tendency to take a long time to break down, but it is kind of a good way of building up beds. So somebody asked, you know, how do I make soil? This is one way you can make a soil particularly in an area that maybe is got not good soil. You don't want to go down, you want to go up. All right, beneficial plants, flowers. As I said, flowers. Some small flowers are really good. These are some of the things that pollinators like. Cone flowers, zinnias, salvias, sedums, pieweed are really good pollinator attractors. Again, these are kind of things. If you're interested in pollinator gardens, Chatham County has great references, and there's actually some demo gardens that are out there. The folks that are run out there, extension agent and the state extension is really into pollinator gardens. We have some great references. Beneficial insects, you know, understand insects, which ones are good or bad, and it takes time. You may, if you're not an entomologist, you don't know this stuff, it'll take you some time to learn it, but definitely some ways of doing it. Here's some examples that I'm going to go through very quickly. Things like lacewings, parasitic swamp, wasp. This is the one slide I would change in Robin's presentation, because this is my favorite picture. This is that tomato hornworm that her grandsons love, covered with parasitic wasps. And these actually have been, the wasp laid its eggs inside, and anybody know that Alien movie with the spaghetti in the, like this? They've already come out. This guy he's not long for this world. Absolutely not. All these wasps are just literally eating him alive.
They're pupating right there. They already ate him alive.
They already ate him alive. So this is my most favorite picture in the world, because this is nature at its best. Nature's way of controlling our tomato hornworm population. And I just love this slide. It gets me so pumped and excited. You can tell. It is totally cool. And besides, I like puffed wheat and rice too. Besides, all right, on to other things. Assassin bug. Ladybugs, ladybird beetles, whatever way you want to call them, great, ravenous in their younger stages. They're eating lots and lots of aphids. They are just going in town. you will get questions that say, well, I want to go out and buy a box of ladybugs and bring them into my garden. Okay, first of all, are they native? Are they local? Are they some kind of import? That's not a good thing. And what happens when they run out of aphids? What do you think is going to happen to them? They're gone. They're out of there. So it's not going to really help you. Better to attract ladybugs into your garden by having a good, organic, healthy garden with lots of good plants and a few disease and insects that are there that they'll come in and eat. And when they're done, they'll go off somewhere else. Always a great sign when I see ladybugs in a garden, because to me, they're like a they're like the canary, right? They're a canary in the mine that said this is a good, healthy garden, right? Because they're doing the right thing. They're here because they like to be. It's a healthy place for them to be. Organic strategies for dealing with pests and disease. First thing, when you're dealing with a problem, what is the problem, right? Understand what your issue is. And that requires you to be in your garden. Be present, be looking, go out there every day or every other day. For me, I love going into my gardens, either the one I work directly at home or the community gardens I'm involved in, to see what is going on. It's really important because that gives you a sense or feel. How are my plants doing? What diseases and pests do I see? Is this, if you think about your IPM circle, I'm monitoring, I set some thresholds. Okay, so I've got some flea beetles on some of my beans. Is that a problem? No, not right now. But if it becomes worse, here's my threshold. I reach that threshold. I have to do something. Do I use a biological? Do I use a chemical? Do I use something physical? What can I do? So understanding that, learn about insects and diseases. And that's what's the really cool thing about being a master gardener. Again, I've been gardening for 30 years. I think I know everything about being a gardener. And I came and realized I knew this much. And because I work with the community, with gardens, with folks like you, as well as in the field, I get to hear their questions and see their problems and then research it. And I go to Louise and say, Louise, what do I do for this particular insect or disease? What other options do I have if I can't find it myself? So it's really exciting because you can constantly learn new things. So this is my IPM kind of slide. It's not really IPM, but it's about the closest I come to it. But excuse me, it really talks about the variety of things that you do. Do you look at your soil, your resistance for varieties? Do you use natural pesticides and beneficial insects? Are you intentionally managing this type of environment? So if I have a problem, what do I do first? Is the problem serious, right? Is it in my IPM methodology, has it reached a threshold that I have to do something? Or is it okay that I have some flea beetles on my beans? It's not going to kill the plant. May it weaken it? May it stress it? Yes. But is it worse than me trying to do something? Well, maybe I'll leave it for right now. But maybe the problem is too serious. It will depend on the plant and the situation. Is it likely that the problem will occur, right? So am I going to continue to have these flea beetles? Or if I have prize roses with Japanese beetles on it, is it going to destroy my plant, right? Is this something I have to do something now? Is it going to continue? Can it be correctly identified? And then can I do something about it once I actually do that? When I look at weeds, there are options I have, including things like hand pulling, mulching, tilling, maybe not so much, but hand pulling is a form of tilling, right? It's removing that soil. Maybe it's cultivating a little bit to break up those weeds that I can't hand pull. Do I use things like cover crops, right? And so during the winter time, again, I use cover crops a lot on my own beds because I hate weeds. I plant a cover crop. Not only does it help the bed for the springtime, but it keeps that weed population down and under control, so I don't have to be weeding my garden with chickweed that's 12 inches tall in the springtime. Thermal, again, can you use thermal? Can you do sterilizing your soil? I know a lot of folks that grow down in Florida during the summertime when they're not planting, because their seasons are kind of backwards from us. They will put black or clear plastic down and sterilize their soil, and it keeps the weeds down. You can use chemical controls, but again, that would be the last thing I would try to do. And this is where I use that little asterisk about non-organic. There are times where I cannot control weeds, that I will use some non-organic weed controls. It's the last thing, the absolute last thing I do, and I do it with people not around. Solarization, talk a little bit about that. Typically you do it in the warm weather. They say with clear plastic, and I know that that's been the research that says clear plastic does better than black plastic, but when I get clear plastic, I just have more of a trouble. It's actually more like a greenhouse and my weeds just get bigger. So again, this is from the research, it says clear plastic, and my thing says clear plastic. I will tell you clear plastic. Do this kind of as the last choice, particularly because when you sterilize the soil, you sterilize everything. So we talk about good beneficial nematodes and things like that. Yeah, you're going to kill the bad things, but you're going to kill the good things too. So realize that this is kind of a last resort when you have no other choice to really it's the nuclear option, right? It's the nuclear option for your soil. It's the last thing you want to do. Insect challenges, how do you deal with them culturally, biologically, physical? I talked about physical barriers. Row cover, I've got some row cover over there. You all can look at that a little bit. Last choice, chemical management, right? And it is always after I've gone through my APM circle a couple of times, I'm going to try, do I have the right cultural environment that I'm trying to prevent against this disease or pest? Do I use biological or physical controls? Last choice is a chemical option, organic or non-organic. Exclusion are some of the physical barriers, cardboard around some of the cutworms that will cut off a plant. Here's a row cover trying to keep diseases and pests off of things like lettuce, although lettuce is usually pretty good. But things about like cabbages and things like that to keep white flies and stuff, or cabbage moths, I will use those as row cover. Traps, there's a Japanese beetle trap that are there. So you have to be careful with some of these things, because like these beetle traps that use a pheromone that's in there that attracts beetles. A lot of discussion would be hey, am I attracting more beetles into my garden than I am? But there are some other ways it can help contain the population. It helps minimize those and beetles. Only the boys. Okay, so there's some questions about how well traps work, and again, whether you're attracting more into there, but that is a mechanism. You need to get it right for the right pest. Hand picking. My dad, and I've gotten a little bit better as I've gotten older, used to pick that Japanese beetles off the roses and put them right into the soapy water. Or he would squish them with his fingers. I am not manly enough to do that. I will take that non-punch in my man card, not to squeeze Japanese beetles. So yeah, put them in soapy water, let them die, and then dispose of them. Do you do sanitation? Do you manage weeds? Do you manage debris from diseased insects? We already talked a little bit about that. Pull out plants that are diseased, right? If you've got a tomato plant that's really got a blight on it, it's not gonna survive. You pull it out, get rid of it. And don't put it in your compost bin. And all this, this tomato is horrible, right? They pull it out and they throw it in the compost. Like, no, you're just putting it back into the soil that we're then gonna put back in. Throw it out. I know it goes into trash, it's not good. Yes, so these are, and you can't quite see it here. Let me see this a little laser, it doesn't. But some of these fruits here are dried up and white. You can see a few of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there. Some of the blueberries that have that disease in them. Insects, and again, this is not an entomology class, but really you have chewing insects like caterpillars. You got sucking insects like aphids. Do you have holes in the leaves? Do you have frass, which is their poop? Do you have little black drops? Cabbage worms, really, you may not find that cabbage worm because they're hiding green little worms inside the middle of your cabbages, but you can see that little black or green poop, and you know that they're there. And if you see that, means that they're active, they're eating. Do you find their webbings? There are sometimes good caterpillars too. right? You know, pretty calipers. If you're willing to sacrifice some of your parsley, man, fine. I'm okay. I will willing to share. Just don't take all my parsley. Piercing insects, sucking insects, they really suck the sap out of leaves. In many cases, they won't kill the plant, but again, weaken or damage, make it more susceptible to diseases and other problems. May cause disease, leaf colorization, discolorization, may also spread diseases. And these are some of the honeydew producers. Also, other things, again, you're gonna see some of this, the black honeydew that you'll see on this, you see it on crepe myrtles and things like that. Challenges, cultural challenges, positive thoughts. I'm not sure what that is. Positive thoughts. Please don't infect my plant. Leave my tomatoes alone. Organic fungicides. So let me talk a little bit about organic and organic fungicides. Although they exist, they are marginally effective. And typically by the time you see a fungus that's on your plant, it's too late. You've already reached that stage where, so if you're using them as a preventative measure, sure. I typically don't, because one, I forget about it, but I also try to err on the side of trying to use seeds that are more disease resistant. Bless you. I follow those practices of trying to keep my plants as separated as I can. And when I get a disease, I try to remove that plant as quickly as possible. Important, and again, I'm not going to go through some of the biology of diseases, but diseases can come from various aspects, from leaves, from fruit, like blossom end rot that's showing here, from various issues, vascular issues that are inside of the actual tissue of the plant, from the roots or crown area. And so lots of different options of where diseases can come in. Only leaf diseases are really treatable. When you start reaching to some of these other problems, it is really not necessarily a treatable thing. Leaf diseases, again, least damaging. You want to look at, what can you do to try to avoid it? Keep your leaves dry. We're North Carolina, it rains almost every day. That's a problem. So, but keeping your plants separated, trying to keep, when you do water at the base of the plants, these are all things. And they are certainly worse in hot, humid, wet North Carolina type environments. So it's definitely a challenging. Mildews, again, affects some things. You're going to look at trying to provide varieties that are more resistant. Growing more resistant varieties are a better way of trying to do this. You can preventatively try to spray for downy and powdery mildew. Crop rotation is also pretty critical because it keeps, I think most of these mildews are airborne diseases, and they're going to be traveling in the air on spores that are flying there. These are things that are non-treatable. So if you've got things like fire blight, root rot, nematodes, those things you can't treat very well. Florida, and we're having more problems with nematodes. Bad nematodes. There are good nematodes, there are bad nematodes. Bad nematodes, root knot nematodes, are becoming more of a problem as our temperature and soil temperatures get warmer. Florida has had this problem for years. Again, they look at growing varieties that are more resistant to those nematodes, and then having to do things like sterilizing their soil. Blossom end rot, we talked a little bit about that. Low pH can also cause it. Again, the lack of the plant's ability to pull up that calcium because your pH is off. Remember Robin's chart with those really cool colors, 6.2 to 6.7 pH for most vegetables. Heat and drought also cause problems, stress on the plant, and cause the problems to have problems with the flower. And it actually occurs in the actually flowering stage. So it's not even at the fruit stage. It's when it's in a flower, it causes that problem. Okay, so I've tried all that. Now what? I'm at the last part of my IPM circle. I'm going to start using pesticides. Organic pesticides are still chemicals. They're made from minerals. They're plant-derived or they're biological microbial. You still need to follow the directions, okay? Because they can hurt people, they can hurt your plants. You put too much organic sulfur on a plant, you're gonna kill it. It can burn the plant, right? So you have to be very careful. We want to know, is a product organic or not? It's a lot of times a question. OMRI is a certification that used for organic products, and you'll find that, and you'll see that on some of the bags that are here, other things that are listed. OMRI is the way to look it up. There is a big listing. You can go online and look at it. You will see that type of reference. It is for use by organic farmers and those people that are following organic practices. Some of the characteristics, they're not persistent, right? They don't exist in the soil for a long time. They break down quickly, which can be a disadvantage too. If you wanted something more persistent, if I wanted a chemical on the plant that when the insect ate it and it got it, right? I want that exists for a couple of days because I may not get the insect all on that first day. If it is not persistent or it washes away, then that may not be a good thing. But that is part of one of the things that makes organic pesticides organic. They're safer to use, but they're still, again, a danger. They typically have non-residual or non-systemic, so something that the plant doesn't pull up or doesn't continue to exist in the soil, which means you have to apply more frequently. And so if you're using things like copper to try to control disease, you may have to spray at copper multiple times to help try to control that fungus. Insecticides, they kill typically on contact or ingestion. So when you're doing these types of insecticides, again, you're going to kind of kill the insect one of two ways. Either the insect is going to eat it and ingest it and die, or it's going to get sprayed on it and die that way. And it can get sprayed a couple of different ways. Sometimes the pest has to be present, particularly if it's a spray mechanism that it's going to be covering it. So it either covers the exoskeleton and it can't breathe, or it's a neurological that causes the insect to have a neurological issue. But they have to be typically be present versus ingested, which might be on leaf where the insect would ingest it at some point, maybe an hour or two after you sprayed it. A biological is one example.
BT.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about the. They typically are not as potent, so you typically have a worse success rate when you use organic chemicals than you do with non-organic because their potency level is lower. So, example, funguses. Like I said, funguses are really tough to deal with organically, but inorganically, there's a lot of really good fungicides that are out there that control funguses a lot better, a lot faster. They're more potent, they're more toxic to the pest. You need to monitor. So just because you spray BT doesn't mean is it affecting, right? Is it doing well? Is it doing the right stuff? You must need to know the right pest and the right treatment. So no different than non-organic chemicals. Going to the doctor and picking the wrong medicine. You want to pick the right thing for the right pest. All right, a little bit. Horticultural insecticidal soap kills soft body insects. Kills on contact, it won't kill necessarily the eggs. And oftentimes insecticidal soap is repeated because again, it's a contact spray. You have to be contacting those insects. It's not sprayed on the plant and then the insect rubs against the plant or something like that. It's not like that. And it washes off, right? The next time it rains, all that insecticidal soap is going to wash away. Horticultural oil, something similar, but it typically kills by smothering. So it's going to get sprayed on the plant, on the insect, and basically smother the breathing apparatus of the insect. And it may kill the different eggs that are on there. They are good for scale, mites, aphids, and whiteflies. But things like this whole horticulture oil, if it's really high temperature, can also have an impact on the plants. So there's a lot of different varieties of horticultural oils that are out there. Again, just follow those instructions, use those for specific types of insects. Okay, BT, hey, BT is wonderful. It's what's called a biological control. And there are different types of Bacillus thuringiensis for different types of insects. So just be careful. BT does not cover every single caterpillar and every single insect that's out there. But like with everything, you want to minimize, if you remember your IPM, you want to minimize your use of this because insects have this great ability of reproducing so frequently, they can create immunities to this. And this is such a great biological control. We want to minimize the chance that we get biologically resistant insects like caterpillars. So when I, complain about genetically modifying, and there's corn and other types of seeds that they embed BT into that genetically, I have objections to that because I don't like the idea of just wholesale using BT no matter what, willy-nilly. Use it for a specific, when you reach your IPM circle and you reach your control level that you have to do something with. Other things like neem oil comes from the neem tree. It's a neurological, I believe, right? Neem is neurological. So it affects the nervous system of the insects, causes them to die. Again, it's organic certified. Spinosad, a little bit more persistent than BT. It's effective on caterpillars and a couple of other types of things. It's from a soil-bearing bacteria. Pyrethrum is derived from chrysanthemums, specific varieties of chrysanthemums. There is a synthetic form of it, so be careful. When you see pyrethrum, some of the other ones, that is a non-organic variety of this. It's kind of simulates the chrysanthemum, but it's a non-organic one. It too, I think it is a neurological impacting on the insects. Read the instructions that say, don't spray this in and around pollinators when they're active. Other things that you can do for disease management, again, protecting, apply before the disease happens. Neem oils have some effect on disease, particularly powdery mildew. But again, you're going to find that these organic controls, and again, I'm way in favor of organic controls, don't get me wrong, but they're going to have much more, you're more trouble controlling the diseases than you would with a non-organic one. Other types of organic controls are things like sulfur, copper, which is a fungicidal and bacterial agent. There are some other types of organic chemical, mineral-based type of controls that we have. Other types of bacilluses, Serenade is one of them. That's for leaf diseases. There's bicarbonate that's available. Again, you need to look at when to apply these when you're going to do them. All right, so we went through organic pest management as an integrated system. We talked a little bit about prevention, things that we do with our plants, with our soils to try to make healthier plants. That's a form of prevention in organic practices. We build healthy soils. We pick the right plants. We do good sanitation practices. We use natural products as part of our IPM management in our circle. We know what we're shooting for. We know what kind of pest it is, what the controls are that are available for that pest, which ones are the best ones. Some problems we can't manage. And if that plant is so diseased, I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to get rid of it.